وافتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصلي لهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. The section we got to was on the al-wadhifat al-sabi'a. So he's talking about what students of knowledge should be occupied with. And obviously he's talking about students of Sharia knowledge, although these arguably could be applied to other types of knowledge. He said the seventh concern, which should be a preoccupation of the student, is أَلَّا يَخُوضَ فِي فُنُونِ الْعِلْمِ دَفَعَةً, that you don't dive into the various aspects of knowledge all at once. بَلْ يُرَاعِيَ التَّرْتِيبَ فَيَبْدَأُ بِالْأَهَمِّ فَالْأَهَمِّ. He should follow the order, the proper order. So he begin with the most important and then follow that. وَلَا يَخُوضُ فِي فَنٍّ حَتَّى يَسْتَوْفِيَ الْفَنَّ الَّذِي قَبْلَهُ. And he shouldn't go into one knowledge without having a sound knowledge of the one that's a prerequisite to that knowledge. So just like at university, you have courses that have prerequisites. You can't take trigonometry until you've taken geometry. You can't take, thank you. You can't take algebra 2 until you've taken algebra 1. The same is true in Sharia knowledges. For instance, you can take dogmatic theology, and by dogmatic theology, I mean creedal theology. Dogma has a negative term now, but it used to be that dogmatic theology was an agreed upon creed of the orthodoxy of the religion. So Catholic dogma, you would study the Athanasian Creed. In Islam, you had certain creeds that were considered canon or dogmatic creeds. Fiqh al-Akbar of Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu. Imam Tahawi's, the Tahawiyya. In the Ash'ari tradition, you had the most famous of the middle period was the Nasafiyya. And then you had, in the later, you had also Umar Barahin, the Sughra, Wusta, and Kubra of Imam al-Sunusi, the Algerian. And then you had, for instance, you had, in the later period, Ida'atu Dujunna, if you were in the east. You had Jawharat al-Tawheed, if you were, Jawharat al-Tawheed of Ibrahim al-Laqani, if you were in the east. If you're in the west, probably Ida'atu Dujunna. And these were dogmatic creeds. Agreed upon, no debates. They would simply present the creed as it was. That doesn't need logic per se, although it would be useful to have it, especially when you're dealing with some of the commentaries definitely use logic. But when you do dialectical theology, when you get into serious kalam, it's a prerequisite. You have to have logic, mantiq. You can't do it without it. In usul al-fiqh, you need mantiq. You could learn usul al-fiqh without it, but you would be handicapped. Al-Ghazali begins his Mustasfa with 40 pages of mantiq. So you don't need a lot of it, but you would need some of it. And so that's what he means. For instance, if you get into Arabic, it's important to learn Arabic in a certain way. I'll give you an example. I was looking at a book. It's a very famous book. I won't mention who wrote it, but it's a relatively modern book on ethics in the Islamic tradition. And I was looking at the fahrasa, or the index. He didn't even deal with shaja'a, like courage. There was no systematic order to his teaching of ethics. It was just ethical ideas with Quran and Hadith. So it was as if he didn't know anything about the ethical tradition of the Muslims. It was a modern book, very popular book. And so this is part of the problem, is if you haven't studied the books necessary to, you can't study the Shatibiyyah without studying the Jazariyah, right? It's going to be very difficult to get into qira'at if you haven't mastered the basic rules of tajweed and things like that. So it's very important that you do that. traditionally they said أهمها العقائد ثم الفروع تصوف وآدة بها الشروع. The most important is aqidah, and then followed by furu' al-fiqh. You should learn the branches of fiqh before you learn usul. People that start teaching usul first, it's not good. What Imam Al-Ghazali is, you should learn a madhab, and you should follow a madhab. So you learn a madhab tradition, and so that's what he means by that. And then you learn tasawwuf is akhlaq, the psychology of the Muslims, how we do tahdhib al-nufus. It's a science, and it has its books like Qut al-Qulub, the Risal of Imam al-Qushayri, Kalabadi, the Rasail of al-Mujaddidi, the Hikam of Ibn Atayla. There's famous books that are well known. Al-Hujwiri, Kashf al-Mahjub. These are the books of tasawwuf, and traditionally they were taught in the madrasa at a certain stage, something from that. And so that's very important. So he says it's important that you learn, and he says that if traditionally, he's also saying that you should learn one thing before you go on to the next thing. Traditionally, they learned one subject at a time. That was the traditional way of teaching. It's a much better way of teaching. In the West, there are certain universities that are starting to adopt this. It's called the block method. So you can go to, there are universities in Canada, the United States, where you will study only one subject for, say, 3 weeks, very intensively. You only study one subject for that intense period, and then you move on to the next subject. That is actually the traditional model of the Muslims. And from what I've read on the websites of the universities that practice this, the teachers all say they would never go back to the old way of teaching, that it's such a more effective way of teaching students. Because when you have a lot of students, when you have a lot of subjects, it's very difficult to keep your mind focused and concentrated on things. You can learn Arabic grammar you can master it in a year. If you really put full time doing nothing else, you could really master it in a year. And that would obviously be already knowing it. You'd have to know Arabic already. I'm talking about just learning grammar and things like that. Sarf is a little more difficult because the vocabulary of Arabic is very extensive and it's very complicated. You have a lot of different ways of saying the same roots, but different things that change the meaning. So that's a little more complicated. But Nahu is not that hard. They make it much harder than it actually is. And so the thing he ends with is وَآلَةٌ بِهَا الشُّرُوعِ. You begin with the ala, and the ala is the Arabic language. The tool of Islamic studies, the sine qua non of Islamic studies is the Arabic. You have to learn Arabic. You cannot study the Islamic tradition without Arabic. You can learn Islam without Arabic, undeniably. You can. You can learn it in English, you can learn it in Urdu, you can learn it in Turkish, and you might have a better understanding than a lot of Arabs. But you cannot learn this tradition or master this tradition without Arabic. It's as simple as that. And the Quran is an Arabic phenomenon. It's not an English phenomenon. It's not a Turkish phenomenon. It is an Arabic phenomenon. It can only truly be experienced in Arabic. When you translate the Quran, it really does change the experience of the Quran, which is why a lot of people, when they read the Quran in Arabic, they have a completely different experience from when they read it, say, in English. It's just a very different book. It also is a very, even for Arabs, it's a very subtle book. It takes a long time to really grasp the subtle nature of the Quran. One of the most common techniques in Quranic Arabic is what's called iltifat, which is very complicated for Western people. And the iltifat is where you switch, you go from a first person to a third person. And it's very jolting. And for when you translate that, because that is actually a technique, a rhetorical technique that has an effect. So for instance, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu. It begins, that's iltifat, to go from Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So it's talking about, you're not talking directly to God. in the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. So that's like speaking like a ghaib. You're not saying hamdan laka or ahmaduka. You're saying alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Those are all, but then when you enter into the ubudiyya, you enter into the presence. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. So this is the way the Quran works. It's difficult for people to grasp these subtleties in another language. And then there's a lot of words in Arabic. For instance, the prophets, when they speak to their people, they always say, Ya qawmi, Ya qawmi, Ya qawmi. You look at the prophets. Whenever they speak to the people, they say, Ya qawmi. But Isa ibn Maryam, when he speaks to them, he says, Ya Bani Israel. He doesn't say, Ya qawmi. Because qawm, you can only say qawm if your fathers are from those people. And in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet said, Afina gharib. And they said, so-and-so, he's from the akhwat. And he said, Ibn ukht al-qawm minhum. You know, so they knew that qawm, if somebody's not from the paternal lineage, he's not really from the qawm. And so Isa doesn't say Ya qawmi, he says Ya Bani Israel, because he can't say Ya qawmi, because he doesn't have a father from them. So that's something that you won't pick up in English. You have to know Arabic to do that. لا يسخر قوم من قوم ولا نساء من نساء. So it's qawm and nisa. There's two different things. The qawm are not the women. They're the male lineage. And that's why the Quran distinguishes with the qawm. Don't let the males make fun of other males, and don't let the women make fun of other women, like that. So the eighth is أن يعرف السبب الذي به يدرك شرف العلوم. You should know the reason why a knowledge has distinction or honor. وأن ذلك يراد به شيئان. And there's two things that should be understood from that. شرف الثمرة, the distinction of the fruit of that knowledge. And then the second one is وَثَاقَةُ الدَّلِيلِ وَقُوَّتُهُ, is the soundness of the proof and its strength. So if you look, he says, look at religious knowledge and look at medicine. One of them, the fruit of which is eternal life. The other one is worldly life that is limited. So medicine deals with the health of the body, and the body is dissipating before our eyes. Religious sciences deal with the health of the soul, and the soul is eternal. One of the unique aspects of human consciousness is you never feel different. Your body feels different, but your consciousness doesn't age. So when you're 70 years old, when you're 90 years old, the consciousness, the experience of consciousness is the same. It doesn't age, because the soul does not age. It grows, it can mature, but it doesn't age like the body. It doesn't. So, and then he says, if you look at, for instance, mathematics or astronomy, he says mathematics is more distinct. It has a greater distinction. Why? Because of the soundness of its proofs. Because astronomy, a lot of it is conjecture, because we don't know, we can't go up out there. We don't really know what's going on out in these galaxies. We look at them, we can see them. Maybe they're there, maybe they're not there. We think we're there, right? Who knows? But mathematics, the proofs are very strong. And so he's saying that is, for that reason, it's stronger. And then he says, from this, you should know that the greatest of knowledges is the knowledge of Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, and then the knowledge of the way to get to Allah with those knowledges. And so he says, فَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَرْغَبَ إِلَّا فِيهِ. So woe unto you if you should desire other than this. وَأَن تَحْرِصْ إِلَّا عَلَيْهِ. Or that you should covet other than this. So that's important. The ninth occupation of the student, أن يكون قصد المتعلم في الحال تحلية باطنه وتجميله بالفضيلة. وفي المآل القرب من الله سبحانه وترقي إلى جوار الملأ الأعلى من الملائكة والمقربين. That the student should intend في الحال تحلية باطنه, to adorn his soul. Remember we had tazkiyah was the first, that's called takhliyah. So the first occupation is that you should do takhliyah, you get rid of your bad qualities. Here's the occupation of tahliyah. So you have takhliyah and tahliyah. And this is you need the knowledge, you need the action, and then the al-amal, zaid al-ilm, al-ilm zaid al-amal, yuthmir al-hal. So knowledge, when it's accompanied with action, the fruit of it is a state. And so he's saying that this should be your goal, is adorning your internal self with tahliyah, وتجميره بالفضيلة, and to beautify it with virtue. وفي المآل القرب من الله سبحانه وترقي إلى جوار الملأ الأعلى. And then in terms of the long term, so you've got the hal and the ma'al. You know, the Arabs say halan wa ma'alan, now and later, right? The hal, you should be concerned about adorning yourself with these virtuous qualities. The ma'al is getting near to Allah. And then a taraqi, which is taraqi is to elevate, to rise in elevation. إِلَى جِوَارِ الْمَلَأِ الْأَعْلَى, to the highest assembly. And this is the assembly of the angels and the cherubim, the muqarribin. ولا يقصد به الرياسة والمال والجاه ومماراة السفهاء ومباهاة الأقران. He should not intend leadership or wealth or stature or arguing with fools or vying with your peers to outdo them. If this is what you have made your goal, then this is not ilm al-akhirah. So you have to see that that's trying to learn fatwas and nahu and lugha and all these things for dunya. And he said that that's a problem. Now, here's something really important, okay? لا تفهمن من غلونا في الثناء على علم الآخرة تهجين هذه العلوم. Do not assume, because of our exaggeration in praising the knowledge of the afterlife, that we are in any way belittling or dismissing these outward knowledges. فالمتكفلون بالعلوم كالمتكفلين بالثغور والمرابطين بها والغزاة المجاهدين. Those people that are preserving these knowledges, they are like those that are protecting the boundaries of the Islamic lands, the murabitin, the mujahideen, the ghuzat and the mujahideen fi sabilillah. Some of them are muqatil, some of them are actually fighters, وَمِنْهُمْ الرِّدْءُ, and some of them are in logistics, وَمِنْهُمْ الَّذِي يَسْقِيهُمْ الْمَاء, and some of them are taking care of their bringing them water and things like that. وَمِنْهُمْ الَّذِي يَحْفَظُ دَوَابَّهُمْ وَيَتَعَهَّدُهَا. Some of them are taking care of the animals. Today it would be the machinery. وَلَا يَنْفَكُّ وَاحِدٌ مِّنْهُمْ عَنْ أَجْرٍ إِذَا كَانَ قَصْدُ وَعِلَىٰ كَلِمَةِ اللَّهِ. But all of them are equal in rewards. Not equal, but all of them have reward if their intention is to elevate the word of God. دون حيازة الغنائم وكذلك العلماء. And the ulama are like that. Allah says, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah raises up those who believe amongst you and those who have been given knowledge in ranks. And Allah says, هُمْ دَرَجَاتٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. They are different degrees with God. So he says, الْفَضِيلَ النِّسْبِيَّةِ. Virtue is relative. So for instance, we can look at the sayraf, like a money changer, and think it's a low position in relation to political leaders. But in relation to a street sweeper, it's a more virtuous job. So he said you have to see the relative nature of this. But don't think also that the one who has a low rank has no dignity, or something like that. And then he says the highest rank is the prophets, and then the awliya, and then the ulama ar-rasikhin fil ilm, and then the salihin. And all of them have these differences in degrees. So you can have a street sweeper who's a wali of God, and you can have a king who's odious to God. So you have to be careful, because the internal ranks are different from the external ranks. But we were ordered to judge by the outward. But we shouldn't belittle people or mistreat them because of whatever their outward worldly thing is. The 10th one is that أن يعلم نسبة العلوم إلى المقصد. You should know the relationship of these knowledges to what you are, your goal is. So you should know what's near, what's far. You should know what's important, what's less important in terms of. And then he gives an example of the Hajj. He says that when you have somebody who's going on Hajj, he has to prepare for the Hajj. So he gets, for instance, he gets zad, his food, his drink. He needs his satchel to carry things. He needs his dabba, his horse or camel, whatever he's going to use now, airplane, car, plane ticket. So he has all of that aspect. And then he has what he's going to take with him, his luggage. And then he also has to learn things. But then he has to set out on the journey. So he's saying that this is also similar, that you have to learn certain knowledges to set out on the journey. If you don't have those knowledges, you shouldn't be setting out on the journey yet. And so the same is true with these knowledges. And so he said the suluk, mufaraqat al-watan bitawajjuh al-Ka'bah, there's manazil, there's different stages. And so he said that, like that knowledge. And then he says al-ulum are 3 stages. Just like you have the preparation for Hajj, the actual journey, and then the actual Hajj. So he gives 3 stages. He says also knowledge is like that. He's using the analogy of your journey to the outward house of God in terms of your journey to the inward house of God. And so the first one is like i'dad az-zad wal-rahila wa shira' an-naqa. And these are like medicine and fiqh and those things that are concerned with the outward actions of the body. Right? So you need these knowledges. The second are like the actual suluk of the journey, qata' al-aqabat, going past the obstacles. And this is like tathhir al-batin an kudurat al-sifat. It's purifying yourself from those negative impurities and attributes that you have. And this is how you overcome the obstacles, just like you have physical obstacles, right? One of the things Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayy said is that when Alexander got to the Alps, not the Alps, when he got to the Himalayas, it was a problem. It was an obstacle. So he brought elephants. And the same with Hannibal when he went over the Alps. So that was an obstacle, and he had to prepare for the obstacle. So he said that this is what you have to do at that stage, is overcoming the obstacle of the self. And this is through tahdib al-akhlaq. But the most important thing he says here is practice. So he says, this is very important, وَتَحْصِيلُ عِلْمِهِ كَتَحْصِيلُ عِلْمِ جِهَاتَ الطَّرِيقِ وَمَنَازِلِهِ. Learning this knowledge is like learning the direction, the compass directions of your path, and then to the map of the path. وَكَمَا لَا يُغْنِي عِلْمَ الْمَنَازِلِ طُرُقَ الْبَوَادِ دُونَ السُّلُوكِ. And just like this knowledge of the maps is not going to benefit you unless you actually go out on the journey. The same is true for the knowledge that you're taking. So you can learn the map, but if you don't set out, then the map was a waste of time. And he said, this is the practice. And the third, قسم الثالث, يجري مجرى نفس الحج وأركانه. It has the place of the actual Hajj and its pillars. وهو العلم بالله تعالى وصفاته وملائكته وفعله وجميع ما ذكرناه في تراجم علم المكاشفة. So these are the things, this is where he says, this is علم المكاشفة, and I've already told you I'm not going to talk about it. So you need the zad, the rahida, you need the map, and then you need to set out on the journey, which is the practice, and the arrival is the fruit that comes from that. He constantly talks about ilm, amal, hal. Ilm, amal, hal. That is the way it works. You learn, you practice, it results in something. And this is true for anything. If you want to learn a musical instrument, you have to sit down, you do the practicing, and you do it. And because you can learn the theory, you go to the teacher and he says, okay, here's the C chord, and the C chord in the circle of fifths. You can use a D chord after a C chord. You go to a G chord, and he'll show you how that works. But if you don't sit and do that practice, then the next week you come and he said, did you practice what we did last week? No. Well, you can't go. That's it. Stop. But if you keep practicing and doing that, slowly by slowly, the mystery of music comes out, right? The same for physical exercise. If you take a golf club or a tennis or a cricket bat or whatever you do, you have a teacher, he tells you hold the cricket bat this way, these are called wickets, and here's the bowler, he throws the, whatever they call him, pitcher. Is he a pitcher? Bowler, yeah. So the bowler throws it, and here's what you have to do, you protect your wickets, hit the thing, right, and then you practice, and he keeps throwing the balls, and you keep practicing until finally you can protect the wickets and become Imran Khan, right? Right, so that Imran Khan didn't get there from reading books about cricket. He probably read books. He probably watched previous cricket players, films of them to see what they were doing. But it was his practice that created the exceptional performance, right? Simple as that. Ilm, amal, hal. And this is why you see, one of the things about our civilization is it's a very low civilization because the only thing it really appreciates excellence in is in music and athletics, which is why I use those two examples. If you can play a musical instrument really well, you'll get millions of people following you on Twitter. You could be the most brilliant, who knows about this poor Iranian woman who just won the Nobel Prize in mathematics, whatever they call it. I don't even know what they call it. Maryam, what was her name? Maryam? Yeah, a genius lady from Iran. She's at Stanford now. Like, Iranians are genius people, historically. Like all the great mathematicians from Iran. So it's not surprising. She's probably like Khwarizmi's great-great-granddaughter or something, But who cares about her and her brilliant discoveries of geometry? I'm too busy watching Lady Gaga, right? This is how stupid modern people are. So, and she's not even that talented. In terms of music, I'm no expert on Lady Gaga, but these modern musicians they're not talented in relation to serious music. You take the classical musicians and what they have to learn and know. So, and then the other thing is sports. If you can throw a ball into a tiny little hole from a far distance, they'll pay you millions of dollars. That's why they're all out there on those courts and golf. It's a ridiculous game. Hit this little ball around, these greens. It was ridiculous. It was actually a Scottish martial art, they say. Like the Scots, they used to hit the balls at their enemies. That was the point. Hole in one was actually like to... But if you're Tiger Woods, you make a lot of money doing that. So, but it's still, even in the outward, you have to practice. They don't get there. You don't get to, like the musician, he was down in Times Square and he asked the policeman, he had his little violin case. He said, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And he said, practice, practice, practice. Like, that's how you get there. So, that's what he's saying. You want to get to God, you have to do the practice. Because just like people are amazed at people that do a lot of practice in dunya things, ovations, that's praise. That's what they do. They give him ovations. Allah is amazed at his servant when he draws near to him through practice. Wallahi, there's hadiths that say that Allah is ajiba. عَجِبَ رَبُّكَ. Allah was amazed at what you did last night. Those people the two Ansaris that pretended to eat while their guest was eating. They turned out the lights, pretended to eat while their guest was eating. The next day they saw the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Allah was amazed at what you did. Because that's practice. And so you get God's ovation. You get the thana of God. He's the one who praises you. And then on Yawm al-Qiyamah, He elevates you in front of His mala, where you get the reward. Just like they have Oscars in dunya for all these worldly things that people do. Allah has these things. This is all metaphor for what's to come. But it's the exact opposite in the akhirah. The high people in dunya are low in the akhirah. And the low people in dunya are high in the other world. Because they were considered nothing in this world. Some saint somewhere, like sitting in his cell, purifying his heart, praying and getting near to his Lord at night. People don't consider them. What a waste of time. Why wasn't he out doing something useful? Now, another thing that I find really fascinating is, see, Imam Al-Ghazali, who knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah, a lot of you studied that, huh? Listen to this, because Maslow, this was considered this great discovery and ridiculous. Right? Like Mark Twain said, the ancients stole all their best ideas from us. Know with absolute certainty that the ulama al-rasikhin, those firmly rooted in knowledge, they understood these things by this internal state. It's not witnessing with the eyes, it's witnessing with the inner eye. And he said, as-sa'ada wara ilm al-mukashafa. Joy comes from this deep inner knowledge of God. وَعِلْمَ الْمُكَاشَفَةِ وَرَاء عِلْمَ الْمُعَامَلَةِ. And this mukashafa, these unveilings that happen inside in your inner state, they come from practice. And this practice is the suluk of tariq al-akhirah. It's the practice on the path towards the next life, وَقَطَعُ الْعَقَبَاتِ, and overcoming the obstacles. وَسُلُوك طَرِيق مَحْوَ الصِّفَاتِ الْمَذْمُومَةِ وَرَاءِ عِلْمَ الصِّفَاتِ. And taking the path of removing the negative qualities of your nature is behind the knowledge of these attributes. So you have to know the knowledge to get rid of those negative attributes. وَعِلْمْ طَرِيقَ الْمُعَالِجَةِ وَكَيْفِيَّةَ السُّلُوكِ وَذَلِكَ وَرَاء عِلْمْ سَلَامَةَ الْبَدَنِ وَمُسَاعَدَةَ أَسْبَابِ الصَّحَّةِ. And this knowledge that you need to know in order to traverse this path, behind that is a sound body. You have to be in good health. Your needs, your basic needs have to be taken care of. So he goes from what Maslow called self-realization, he would call mukashafa, which is the highest in this hierarchy of needs. Our need to really fulfill our true purpose, to have human flourishment. And this is based on good health. وَسَلَامَةَ الْبَدَنِ بِالِاجْتِمَاعِ وَالتَّظَاهُرِ وَالتَّعَاوُنَ الَّذِي يُتَوَصَّلُ بِهِ إِلَى الْمَلْبَسِ وَالْمَطْعَمِ وَالْمَسْكَنِ. And this is based on having food and drink and security. Food, drink, and a residence. وَهُوَ مَنُوطٌ بِالسُّلْطَانِ وَقَانُونِهِ فِي ضَبْطِ النَّاسِ. And this is based on having security. You have to have security. I mean, look, he's giving you it's even more sophisticated than this modern idea. So he's saying this is based, and this is why when you see all this anarchy in the Muslim world, people cannot flourish spiritually. You can't flourish when it's anarchy outside. In a city like Kunya, you can flourish spiritually if you want to. But in a place where you've got somebody trying to bulldoze your house down, like in Palestine or in Iraq, where you have people chasing people out because they don't agree with them, or chopping off heads and things. How can people spiritually come to any self-realization? They can't. It's a disaster. And that's why فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي يَطْعَمُهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّنْ خَوْفٍ. Worship this Lord, the one who gave you security and nourishment. So He took care of your basic needs. Once that's done, then you have to do the ibadah. If that's not done, how can you do the ibadah? How can you do it? With the intent and the purpose and the way that it was meant to be done. And then he said, and if you say, again, he's always preempting his critics. If you say, how dare you make fiqh and medicine equal to the provision and the beast on the Hajj? He said, السعي إلى الله لينال قربه هو القلب دون البدن. That the one going to God, to get the nearness to God, is the heart, not the body. وَلَسْتُ أَعْنِي بِالْقَلْبِ اللَّحْمَ الْمَحْسُوسِ. And I don't mean by the heart this physical lump of flesh. But هو سر من أسرار الله. This is a secret among the secrets of God. لا يدركه الحس. The sensorium can never understand it. لطيفة من لطائفه تارة يعبر عنه بالروح وتارة بالنفس المطمئنة. Sometimes it's a subtle thing from God's subtleties. Sometimes we call it the ruh, the spirit. Sometimes we call it the nafs, the soul, al-mutma'inna, at peace. وَالشَّرْعُ يُعَبِّرُ عَنْهُ بِالْقَلْبِ. And the Sharia talks about it as the heart, because it is the مَطِيَّةُ الْأُولَى لِذَلِكَ السِّرِّ. This is the vehicle to that secret. بِوَاسِطَتِهِ صَارَ جَمِيعَ الْبَدَنِ مَطِيَّةً وَآلَةً لِتِلْكَ اللَّطِيفَةِ. And by its means, the entire body becomes the vehicle and the tool by which we get to this subtle quality, the reality. كشف الغطاء عن ذلك السر من علم المكاشفة. So this is how you get to this. And he says, يسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي. They ask you about the ruh. Say the ruh is from the amr of my Lord. Now listen to what he says. وَكُلُّ الْمَخْلُوقَاتِ مَنْسُوبَةٌ إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَلَكِنَّ نِسْبَتُهُ أَشْرَفُ مِنْ نِسْبَةِ سَائِرِ عَطَاءِ الْبَدَنِ فَلِلَّهِ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ جَمِيعًا وَالْأَمْرُ أَعْلَى مِنَ الْخَلْقِ وهذه الجوهرة النفيسة الحاملة لأمانة الله تعالى المتقدمة بهذه الرتبة على السماوات والأراضين والجبال إذ أبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها هي من عالم الأمر. ولا تفهم من هذا تعريضا بقدمه فالقائل بقدم الأرواح مغرور جاهل لا يدري ما يقول فلنقبض عنان البيان عن هذا الفن فهو وراء ما نحن بصدده. It's a beautiful statement. He says all of the creation is attributed to Allah, but its relationship in terms of its honor and distinction is the most dignified and distinct of all of the aspects of the human, the body. فَلِلَّهِ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ جَمِيعًا. Allah has creation and the amr, both of them, but the amr is higher than the creation. So when Allah says the ruh is from the amr of God, what He's saying is this is the highest thing that I have made from my makhluqat. And then He said it is a subtle essence that carries the amana of God, this sacred trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's over the heavens and the earth and the mountains. All who refused to carry it, they were overwhelmed by it and feared it. And for that reason, it's from alam al-amr. It's from the world of His affair. And then He says, but do not understand from this that I am in any way insinuating that the ruh is eternal, pre-eternal. In other words, it has qidam. We know it has azal. This is what's called ev-eternal in Western theology. Something that has a beginning but no end. So the soul has a beginning but no end. So he's saying the soul is not like God. God had no beginning, God has no end. هو الأول والآخر. First without beginning, الأول بلا ابتداء والآخر بلا انتهاء. He's the first without beginning and the last without end. The ruh has a beginning, which is that it was created by Allah, by amr, kun fayakun. And then he says, so we'll stop here. فَلْنَقْبِضْ. We're going to take hold of the reins. He said, I'm pulling back here. عِنَانَ الْبَيَانِ. I'm pulling back on the reins of expression. Because This is not the point of this book. Like, I'm not going to delve into these things here. وَالْمَقْصُودَ أَنَّ هَذِهِ اللَّطِيفَةِ هِيَ السَّعْيَ إِلَى قُرْبِ الرَّبِّ. The point of this subtle quality of the soul is that it goes towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَكُلُّ عِلْمٍ مَقْصَدُهُ مَصْلَحَةُ الْبَدَنِ. Every knowledge, the benefit of which is bodily, it is from the benefits of this vehicle to God. And you should know, وَلَا يَخْفَى أَنَّ الطِّبَّ كَذَلِكَ. Medicine is from that. قد يحتاج إليه في حفظ الصحة على البدن, because we need medicine sometimes to protect the health of the body. And لو كان الإنسان وحده لا احتاج إليه والفقه يفارقه في أنه لو كان الإنسان وحده ربما كان يستغني عنه ولكنه خلق على وجه لا يمكن أن يعيش وحده. If a human being was alone in creation, maybe he wouldn't need these things like fiqh, because fiqh is really about how to be with other people and how to transact, and maybe he wouldn't. But he said he didn't. Allah created us as a collective being. We're a societal being, and so for this reason, we have to understand that these things are to help us. And then he says something very interesting. He said that no matter how much people become confused, no matter how much their passions overwhelm them, no matter how much the asbab al-shahawat wa tanaza'u wa taqatilu, no matter how much they differ, how much they fight, even when they're on the verge of destruction, and sometimes leading to destruction, he said, وَكَمَا يَحْسُرُ هَلَاكُهُمْ بِسَبَبِ تَضَادَ الْأَخْلَاطِ مِنْ دَاخِلِ. Sometimes the body is destroyed because of internal problems. It's medicine that helps balance the body. And just like that, it's politics that helps balance the society. فعلم طريق اعتدال الأخلاق طب وعلم طريق اعتدال أحوال الناس في المعاملات والأفعال فقه. So the knowledge that keeps the body balanced, we call it medicine. The knowledge that keeps the society balanced, we call it fiqh, or jurisprudence, or law. وَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ يَحْفَظُ الْبَدَنَ الَّذِي هُوَ مَطِيَّ. And the point of all of this is to protect the body so it can take its journey to God. Health in its body and health in its social body. Because both of these will help the person on their journey to God. You can be healthy in your body, but if your society's insane, you're not going to be able to be on your journey. It's too crazy. So you're depressed, you're looking outside, you look out the door. How can you sit and be present with your Lord when you've got somebody shooting rockets at you? Or F-16s flying over, or dropping bombs on you. You can't. It's not possible. And that's why these sciences are so important. We need rightly guided leaders. We need enlightened politicians. It says, فالمتجرد لعلم الفقه والطب إذا لم يجاهد نفسه لم يصلح قلبه. But if all you're concerned about is law and medicine, and you don't fight yourself, the heart will never, لم يصلح قلبه. He'll never be able to fix his heart. It's like the one who he wants to buy the camel and the alaf of the camel, the fodder, وشراء الراوية and وخرزها, and buy the water carrier and stitch it. إذا لم يسلك بادية الحج والمستغرق عمره في دقائق الكلمات, if he doesn't ever set out on the journey, and he spends his life wasting his life in these subtle words or reading all of these books about fiqh, spending his life reading about the journey, he said it's the same. It's a person who never takes the journey, he's wasted his life. فتأمل هذا أولا. So think about this. وَاقْبِلَ النَّصِيحَ مَجَّانًا. Take my advice for free. He said, I'm giving you free advice. مِمَّنْ قَامَ عَلَيْهِ ذَلِكَ غَالِبًا. From somebody who did all this stuff that I'm talking about. Like, he's an expert at this. وَلَمْ يَصِلْ إِلَيْهِ إِلَّا بَعْدَ جَهْدٍ جَهِيدٍ. And I only got to I only arrived after great, great struggle. So he's saying, look, I made the journey and I wrote the map for you. Here's the map. I took the journey to prove to you that it could be done. So here it is. And here's the map. I'm giving it all to you. Majanan. Not asking any money. Here it is. So take it or leave it. Now, this is the toughest part for me. Bayan wada'if al-murshid al-mu'allim. So now he's going to talk about teachers, right? So now you all know you're not students. So you can now find out I'm not a teacher. اعلم أن للإنسان في علمه أربعة أحوال. There's basically 4 states in terms of knowledge. كما له اقتناء الأموال. Just like you earn money, إذ لصاحب المال حال استفادة فيكون مكتسبا. You're either earning money, so you're مكتسب, right? Or حال اتخاذ لما اكتسبه فيكون به غنيا عن السؤال. Or you're hoarding your money, keeping it in the bank, and this means that you're ghani, so you don't need to ask people for things because you've got what you need. وحال إنفاق على نفسه فيكون به منتفعا. Or you're spending it on yourself, and therefore you're benefiting from your money. وحال بذل لغيره فيكون سخيا متفضلا وهو أشرف أحواله. Or you are expending it on others and showing generosity and bounty and virtue through that. And this is the best of the 4. So he said, just like that, knowledge is the same. It's like money. So you have the talab wa iktisab. Just like you go out and search for money, do things to get money, he said same thing. You go out to search for knowledge, you acquire the knowledge. And then, حال تحصيل يغني عن السؤال. You get to a point where you don't need to ask people anymore because you know. If you know how to pray, you don't have to ask somebody, how many arkan of the prayer? What do I do when I do this? I think I made a mistake on the sunnah. Do I have to do sahu or not? If you learned your fiqh, أغنيت نفسك عن السؤال, that you don't need to ask people, right? So just like a rich man doesn't need to go out and ask people for money, a person who's learned doesn't need to go out. So then he says that وحال تحصيل يغني عن السؤال وحال استبصار وهو تفكر في المحصل والتمتع به. And then also, once you have knowledge, you can actually reflect, and that knowledge begins to benefit you personally. So it has an effect on you. You look at things differently. You understand things differently. And then also you start to teach it. Tabsir. And that's the best of these. فمن علم ما عمل فمن علم وعمل وعلم فهو الذي يدعى عظيما في ملكوت السماء. So the one who learns, who acts according to his knowledge, and who teaches that knowledge, he is called great in the heavens. He's called great in the ملكوت السماء. فإنه كالشمس. He's like a sun. تضيء لغيرها وهي مضيئة في نفسها. It gives light to others, but it itself is illuminated. وكالمسك الذي يطيب غيره وطيب. Like musk, that it's pure in itself, it has a beautiful scent, and it gives beautiful scent to others. And then he says, and the one who teaches but doesn't act, he's like a notebook. Benefits others, but it's of no benefit to himself. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they're like the one كَمَثَلَ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا, like a donkey that carries the books of knowledge on its back but doesn't benefit from it. بِئْسَ مِثَلٌ. And then he said وَكَالْمِسَنْ, like the whetstone. The misan is the mishhad, like you make sharpen the knife with it. Like a misan, الذي يشحذ غيره ولا يقطع. So it sharpens something, but it doesn't cut itself. The whetstone is dull. So that's a scholar that doesn't act. He's like a whetstone. والإبرة التي تكسو غيرها وهي عارية. Or like the ibra that stitches something else, but itself is naked. وذبالة المصباح تضيء لغيرها وهي تحترق. Or like the wick of a lamp, you know, the old-fashioned lamps, that it lights for others, but it itself burns itself up.
ومهما اشتغل بالتعليم فقد تقلد أمرا عظيما وخطرا جسيما فليحفظ آدابه ووظائفه. So whoever is preoccupied with teaching, let him know that he has taken upon something immense and very dangerous, of momentous danger. So let him guard its comportments, its adab, its courtesies, and also its occupation. The first occupation, الوظيفة الأولى الشفقة على المتعلمين وأن يجريهم مجرى بنيه. The first one is that he's compassionate with the students and he should consider them like his children. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا أَنَا لَكُمْ مِثْلَ الْوَالِدِ لِوَلِدِهِ. I am like a father to his child. فَإِنَّ قَصْدُهُ إِذْ إِنْقَاذَهُم مِّن نَارِ الْآخِرَةِ. Because his intention is to save you from the fire of the next life, just as the father here, or the parent here, the mother will attempt to save you from the fire of the dunya. So the mother, I was with one of the mothers tonight, and the child got right next to the curb, and she grabbed the child, pulled it back. Why? Because the instinct is to protect the child. Even though the child wasn't in danger, there's still the instinct is maybe they'll get into danger. This is the way the prophets are with humans. They see them literally about to enter a fire, and they're trying to grab them and pull them back with their wa'd, with their irshad. And the same way for the teachers that know, if they really have that knowledge and they know what this thing means and what this is about and what human beings are in. They want to save people, they want to help, they want to chop off their heads, they want to save their heads. They want to help them. فَإِنَّ عُلَمَاءَ وَأَبْنَاءَ الْآخِرَةِ مُسَافِرُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ. The scholars and the children of the next world, they are traveling to God. سَارِكُونَ إِلَيْهِ الطَّرِيقُ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Their path is from the dunya to the akhirah. سِنُوهَا وَشُهُورُهَا مَنَازِلُ الطَّرِيقِ. The years, the months, the days, the months, the years, so the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, and the years, these are the journey. This is the journey. These are the steps. Every breath is a step towards the akhirah. And so you have to have compassion for people. One of the most interesting things, because I do a lot of traveling, and what I've noticed over the years of traveling, people are incredibly well behaved when they travel. It's actually quite rare. When you're at airports, people really are on their best behavior. It's very interesting. Maybe in some Muslim countries a little different, but anyway, where I am, I know Muslims get a little impatient. Things don't work. The buses are horrible in the Muslim world. Like, you have to fight to get on a bus in a lot of places. But generally, people are really, Muslims are actually quite good on Hajj. If you look on Hajj, because they remember it's a spiritual journey, and you can remind them, Sallu ala nabi, Udhkur Allah, people say that and then they kind of come back. But generally, when people are on a journey, they're actually well behaved at airports. And if somebody gets rude and upset, people really get upset about it. I've seen this many times. When one person starts getting upset or giving the lady a hard time at the counter, other people get upset. And people will come up to her afterwards and apologize. And she'll be like, no, I know, people get stressed out and things like that. But there's something very interesting. What he's saying is, this is a journey. وَالتَّرَافُقْ فِي الطَّرِيقِ بَيْنَ الْمُسَافِرِينَ إِلَى الْأَمْصَارِ سَبَبَ التَّوَادُ وَالتَّحَابُ. This kindness that you show to fellow travelers, this is what engenders love. Just being kind to fellow travelers. Because we're all on this journey together. Everyone, we're all going to die. Everybody, we're all going to die. We don't know when. We have a general idea. If you're 20, you might live to be 70, 80, even maybe 90. These days, maybe even 100. But it's going to max out. 120, maybe. And most people, you get to a certain age and you're kind of looking forward to the thing coming to a close. My mother told me my mother's 94 this year, and she was at a, and she's been sick for the last 5 years, but alhamdulillah, she's been doing well. But she was at a grocery store, and there was another older lady there.
and they were looking at all these horrible magazines they have, at the counter as you're checking out. There's all these magazines. And the lady looked at the magazine, and then she looked at my mom, and she just said, "Aren't you glad we're on our way out?" Because it's just getting so weird. I mean, my mother grew up in a very different world. When she was born, there was an Ottoman caliph. People forget that. There's people alive today when there was an Ottoman caliph. But it was a very different world. People generally had courtesy. It wasn't all this anger. Generally, people were actually quite, even when I was younger, much younger, there was a lot more just basic courtesy. People are much ruder today. It's nice to be in a place like Turkey where you still see a lot of courtesy. It's really nice. Right? You agree? It's different, isn't it, from where you grew up? Yeah. Because we have, Sarah was in America and she's been here, and that's what she told me. It's really nice. It's nice to see normal people that don't have purple hair and tattoos all over their bones, out of their noses, and taking soap suds or whatever they call them, eating other people's noses and things like that. Right? I mean, the demons have just come out in full force. So he's saying, we should just take care of each other on this journey. If you're seeking positions of power and influence and all these things, where are you from? إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً. The believers are brothers, fraternity, brothers and sisters. Ikhwa is brothers and sisters. الْأَخِلَّاءُ يَوْمَئِذٍ بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ إِلَّا الْمُتَّقِينَ. All these intimate friends in this world, on that day, they're enemies of one another, except the people of taqwa. So if they're friends in the next world, they certainly should be friends in this world. So when you have all this animosity, it's sickness in your heart for other Muslims. الوظيفة الثانية, the second, أن يقتدي بصاحب الشرع صلوات الله وسلامه. So the first one is that he should have compassion. If he's not compassionate, he shouldn't be teaching. The Prophet said, beware of the tyrannical scholars. Beware of scholars. Imam Shafi'i has some lines that are very famous about being patient with a harsh teacher. And teachers tend to be, there are Jalali teachers and Jamali teachers. Some of the ulama say the Jalali teacher actually does you a favor because it's harder to have bad adab with them. So it just depends. Some teachers are a little tough, and we have many examples of great teachers in the history of Islam that were very harsh. And then, in the West, I remember, I played high school football, and I thought my coach hated me. He was just so hard on me. I literally thought he hated me. And I saw him, like a year after I got out of high school, I saw him. And he said, "Hey, how you doing?" And Mr. Jackson. And we went and sat down. We actually had a conversation. And I asked him, I said, what'd you have against me? He says the opposite. You were actually my favorite person on the team. I was like, thanks. So he was actually like, it was out of love that he was being so hard on me. But I didn't know it at the time. So sometimes it's like a parent. You think they're being hard on you, but very often it's because they love you. And some parents, they have different philosophies. Some believe that the best thing they can do is let you know how harsh the world is. That to cuddle you and comfort you too much is actually doing you a great disservice, because when you get outside of the house and realize how brutal the world actually is, you haven't been prepared for it, and then you're too sensitive. And that's why traditionally women were protected from the world, because their sensitivity is important for humanization of people. That if the women go out into the world and become desensitized, then where is the rahmah in the world? That's what's happened to all these modern women working and becoming like men. Even the tone of their voice has gone down a couple octaves. In America, like here, you still hear these really high-pitched female voices. Just watch the women on CNN or any of these things. They've all dropped 2 octaves, right? So even they lose that quality.
and politicians, it's very difficult for female politicians because when they give their speeches, they have to be very careful about getting into that shrill, a high-pitched, they actually consciously are aware of that because it's inappropriate for a woman traditionally to do that. Like men can do that in speeches and things like that, but when a woman does that, it has a different effect. And this again gets back to polarity and this complete lack of acceptance that there are serious biological differences between these two aspects of the same species. That men and women are different, right? Martians and Venetians, whatever you want to call it, there's different ways of looking at it, but brain sex is worth reading. There are several books that have been done on this, just about these differences between estrogen, between Pitocin, between testosterone, the effects that these have on us. You give women testosterone and they start behaving like men. They even grow hair on their chest, right? You give men estrogen, they start behaving like women, right? And one of the things about modern men becoming more and more effeminate, there's a lot of estrogen mimickers out there. We don't know what's going on. There's so many plastics in the environment, and things are happening. Men are developing breasts now and things like this, and it's very common now. Even they found that in the natural world, birds are getting fatter, and animals are actually getting fatter in the natural world. They're seeing this, so we don't know what these plastics that are estrogen mimickers are being put in, because women are meant to have more fat than men on their bodies. So there's a lot of things happening that we don't fully understand that are going on, but. Anyway, I don't know how I got onto that. So, الوظيفة الثانية أن يقتدى بصاحب الشرع. أن يقتدي بصاحب الشرع. That he seriously follows the Prophet ﷺ, and the most important thing is that they don't charge money for their knowledge. That's what he says. فلا يطلب على إفاضة العلم أجرا ولا يقصد بها جزاء ولا شكرا. لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله. If you're feeding food that strengthens the body for the sake of God, how much more important is it than for the food of the soul should be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بل يعلم لوجه الله وطالما للتقرب إليه ولا يرى لنفسه منة عليهم. They shouldn't see themselves over them. They should see that they're actually giving them a great gift, because they're able to give that knowledge back and then plant it for the next generation. So this is very important. And there's big debates about taking, the ulama debated about taking money for teaching the Quran and things like that. And the early ulama were generally opposed to it. As time passed, when you get into complex societies, it's not as easy as these earlier societies. They become more difficult. So the ulama gave permission for the imam to take a ratib, for the mu'adhin, from the awqaf, and things like this. So, but generally, people should not be charged in terms of schools and things like that. One of the things that Zaytuna, that we want to do, and we've talked about this with Imam Zayd, and I have talked a lot about this, is that the students, it's on merit that they get in, and then we have always scholarships for the students. Almost all the students are on full scholarship anyway. But that's a goal, because that is our tradition. Students should not be charged. One of the things like coming here, obviously there's expenses and everything like this, but it's a non-profit. Nobody's making money. Aisha she doesn't take a dime from what she does. These volunteers are not taking any money. We're not getting paid. I'm not getting paid to teach you here. I mean, you can talk to Aisha about it. Some of the teachers get honorarium, which helps them, but they don't ask for it. None of them ask for it. So, but coming here costs money. People complain about it. They say it's not deen intensive, it's deen expensive. But that's why we're trying to offer it out there for people so that they can go online and see it. But things are expensive. Look around. Look at what it costs to do this stuff, to keep it going. It's not easy. People think that people make money off these things, and try it. See for yourself. There's no. Anyway, that's Allah knows that. So I'm just, all those people that say that stuff, it's just hasanat they're giving other people from their hasanat, because they're backbiting without any knowledge, about it. So that's fine. They can do it. It's fine. Marhaban. Allah says, وَيَا قَوْمِ لَا أَسَرُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مَالًا إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ. I'm not asking you for any money. My reward is with Allah. إِنَّ الْمَالَ وَمَا فِي خَادِمُ الْبَدَنِ وَالْبَدَنِ مَرْكَبُ النَّفْسِ وَمَطِيَّتُهَا. Wealth is وَمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا, and whatever's in the dunya is to serve the body, and the body is the vehicle of the soul. وَالْمَخْدُومُ هُوَ الْعِلْمِ, and what is serviced is knowledge. إِذْ بِهِ شَرَفُ النَّاسِ, because by it the soul is honored. فَمَنْ طَلَبَ بِالْعِلْمِ الْمَالِ كَانَ كَمَنْ مَسَحَ أَسْفَلَ مَدَاسِهِ وَنَعْلِهِ بِمَحَاسِنِهِ لِيُنَظِّفُهُ. So that's like somebody, if you're seeking knowledge for money, or teaching knowledge for money, he said you're like the one who's wiping the bottom of his shoe with in order to clean it, the thing that you're trying to clean it by wiping the bottom of your shoe. It's crazy. فَجَعَلَ الْمَخْدُومَ خَادِمًا. He makes what should be served the servant, and he makes the servant what's served. وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْإِنْتِكَاسِ. This is inversion. عَلَى الرَّأْسِ. It's like you're walking on your head. ومثله هو الذي يقوم في العرض الأكبر مع المجرمين ناكسي رؤوسهم عند ربهم. And this is why on the Ard al-Akbar there are people that walk on their heads. There are people that literally tipped upside down because they lived their life inverted. Their feet were in the heavens and their head was in the dunya. فانظر كيف انتهى أمر الدين إلى قوم يزعمون أن مقصودهم التقرب إلى الله. So look at the affair of our religion amongst these people that claim to be getting near to Allah by studying fiqh and kalam and teaching and all these things. All they're trying to do is get money and stature. يتحملون أصناف الذل في خدمة السلاطين للاستطلاق الجرايات. They're just trying to get salaries from the rulers. ولو تركوا ذلك لتركوا ولم يختلف إليهم. And then he says something really interesting here. ثم يتوقع المعلم من المتعلمين يقوم له في كل نائبة. The teacher expects these students to do everything for them. وينصر وليه ويعادي عدوه, to stand by them and defend them against every enemy. ينتهض حمارا له, get up and get his donkey for him. مسخرا بين يديه في أوطاره فإن قصر في حقه. And then if he stints him, ثار عليه, he gets angry. صار من أعداء أعدائه, he becomes angry at him. فاخسس بعالم. What a wretched scholar this is. يرضى لنفسه هذه المنزلة. He's content to be in this state and then he's happy about it. He has no shame. So you look at the signs and you see for yourself at the delusions that these people have. الوظيفة الثالثة ألا يدخر من نصح المتعلم شيئا. He should not stint on giving sincere advice to the student. He should warn him and help him on his path and remind him that he should not seek knowledge for dunya and all of those things. And Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, once was seen, he was very depressed, and somebody said to him, Malaka, what's wrong with you? He said, Sirna matjaran li abna' ad-dunya. We've become a shop for the worldlings, the children of this world. Yalzamuna ahaduhum, they cling to us, they spend a lot of time, hatta idha ta'allama, until they get knowledge, ju'ila amidan aw qadiyan aw qahramana, until they become a government agent or a qadi, a judge, or a qahramana. It's like an executive, somebody that's put in charge of something. الوظيفة الرابعة هي من دقائق صناعة التعليم أن يزجر المتعلم عن سوء الأخلاق بالطريق التعريب. He said this is one of the subtleties of the art of teaching, and that is that he prevents the student from bad character, but he does it with ta'reed, ما أمكن. He does it in a subtle way as best as he can. لا يصرح بالطريقة الرحمة لا بالطريقة التوبيخ. He does it with mercy, not with harshness. فَإِنَّ التَّصْرِيحَ يَهْتِكُ حِجَابَ الْهَيْبَةِ. Because if you do that, it removes the hijab of awe. وَيُورِثُ الْجُرْأَةَ عَلَى الْهُجُومِ بِالْخِلَافِ. And it will actually create in them this desire to, and that's why this desire to rebel. So you should do that. The Prophet ﷺ said, لو منع الناس عن فت البعر لفتوه وقالوا ما نهينا عنه إلا وفيه شيء. That the Prophet ﷺ said, if people were prohibited from splitting open the dung of a camel, they would split it open and say, the only reason we're told not to do it, there must be something in it. Right? This is a human nature. فَيُنَبِّهُكَ عَلَى هَذَا قِصَّةُ آدَمَ وَحَوَاء. And this is one of the meanings of the story of Adam and Hawa. They were told not to go to that thing. And he said, this story wasn't mentioned, he said, مَا ذُكِرَتِ الْقِصَّةُ مَعَكَ لِتَكُونَ سَمَرًا. This wasn't mentioned as a conversation piece. Right? This was mentioned for us to learn from it. And so he said, it's better to do this subtly. And he said, intelligent people will understand the meanings. الوظيفة الخامسة أن المتكفر ببعض العلوم لا ينبغي أن يقبح في نفس المتعلم العلوم التي وراءها. And then the one who knows some knowledges, he shouldn't make the other ones appear ugly to the student. So there's people that you get fuqaha that don't like grammar. And this happens. They just say, oh, just learn what you need, that's it. And don't waste your time with this. But you need grammarians. You need people to master grammar. So he's saying don't do that. And you'll have people that incline towards grammar. They love grammar. And that's a secret from God for them to preserve language. It's important to have grammarians. You need that. And so that's important. And then he says, الوظيفة السادسة أن يقتصر بالمتعلم على قدر فهمه. That he should, when he's teaching, he should be aware of the level of understanding of the student. Because if he gives him too much, that it will end up having the opposite effect. وَيَخْبِطَ عَلَيْهِ عَقْلَهُ. He could end up actually harming his intellect. And this is Sayyid al-Bashar, who said, نحن معاشر الأنبياء أمرنا أن ننزل الناس أو ننزل الناس منازلهم ونكلمهم على قدر عقولهم. We, the generation of prophets, we were commanded to deal with people according to their rank and stature. Every person give them their due. And he said, and to speak to people at the level of their intelligence, their على قدر عقولهم. Not to go iron that. فَلْيُبُثْ إِلَيَ الْحَقِيقَ إِذَا عَلِمَ أَنَّهُ يَسْتَقِلُ بِفَهْمِهَا. So he can tell him things if he knows that he can understand it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا أَحَدٌ يُحَدِّثُ قَوْمًا بِحَدِيثٍ لَا تَبْلُغُ عُقُولُهُم إِلَّا كَانَ فِتْنَةً عَلَى بَعْضِهِمْ. Nobody will talk to people with words that their intellects cannot comprehend, except it will be a fitna for some of them. And unfortunately, one of the problems today is the internet. So you're getting all these different people, and they misunderstand things because a lot of people don't know language anymore. They don't know, for instance, conditional sentences. If you say, I'll give you an example from my own personal experience. If you say, if there are any martyrs, they would be the firefighters, right? That's not saying the firefighters were martyrs. If you understand how language works, it's not saying that. But because people don't understand language anymore, they don't study grammar, they don't know what a conditional sentence is, right? You have a shart, you have jawab shart in Arabic, right? So this is a big problem for people that actually speak. And unless you want to become like Tarzan English or something, and this is basically texting, right? Tarzan, me Tarzan, you Jane, LOL.